Live breaking news from KCTV 5 News.
Breaking right now, the Johnson County District Attorney holding a news conference to give an update on the criminal investigation involving Tyreek Hill. Let's listen in.
Department of Children and Families, DCF, have submitted the results of their investigation involving Tyreek Hill and Crystal Espinal's child for consideration of charges. This office has reviewed all the evidence compiled by these agencies and has declined to file charges against Tyreek Hill and Crystal Espinal. We are deeply troubled by this situation and are concerned about the health and welfare of the child in question. We believe that a crime has occurred. However, the evidence in this case does not conclusively establish who committed this crime. Criminal cases must be proven beyond a reasonable doubt by admissible evidence, not speculation, rumors, or hearsay. Despite this decision, there will be a continued involvement by state officials to ensure the safety of the child. Those actions are separate and apart from our decision on criminal charges. Because of the ongoing child protection investigation, we are unable to discuss the facts of this case with you. Now, at this time, I'm going to try to answer some questions for you, but I hope you understand there's probably going to be a lot of things that I can't talk about at this point.
Why do you believe a crime was committed?
Based on the evidence that was presented to us.
What crime do you think occurred?
I'm not going to go into those details again because of the child protection investigation. I'm going to ask all of you to be aware that in these instances we're talking about a minor, a child. And the system and DCF and child investigations, we have to be very cognizant about protecting the rights of that child. So I know you have a job to do, and you have a duty to ask those questions, but we also have to respect the wishes of individuals that are involved in that case.
Steve, from what I understand, the March 5th case, you had already declined to file charges in that. Is that correct? And so you're talking about the March 14th case, or are you talking about both of these in general?
That's a good question. I want to talk about this is the entire investigation, not parts of it. And just to clarify some of those things, it's not uncommon for police departments to submit portions of their investigation for our review. In this instance, part of the delay was then we asked the police department to do some follow-up work for us to help us in our decision. That follow-up work was concluded, allowing us to make a decision in this case, and we've just discussed with you what that decision is. So that was part of the reason for that delay.
Can you kind of clarify? I think some people are a little bit confused. Were police called to the house, or was there an alert from the child going to a hospital? Can you kind of clear up exactly, you can't tell us exactly what you think happened, but kind of how it went down?
Well, again, I've got to be very careful about discussing the particular facts of this case, but a lot of you have already asked and received some of the face sheets from the police department that outline two particular instances where the police were called to the house. Other than that, I can't go into any more details about it. No, because, again, there's an active investigation ongoing separate and apart from the criminal charges, and therefore I've got to be cautious about divulging that information.
You believe a crime occurred, but you can't say who committed the crime. How do you go about trying to learn that information, and when do you decide to just stop?
Well, we believe at this point we've asked the police department to do quite a bit of follow-up work. They have concluded their investigation. So at this time, that is why I'm standing before you at this point, is we feel we're at an impasse at this point, and any further investigation would be unnecessary or unwarranted.
Steve, are you going to be able to work with the child protection authorities? I mean, I know you're part of it. I believe you said it was over. But will you work with them in concert with them?
As many of you already know, the Johnson County District Attorney's Office not only is charged with handling criminal investigations, but also, when appropriate, we also deal with child in need of care cases. And I'm not going to either admit or deny the fact that there is one pending, but I'm just going to say that that is part of our duties, is to file those types of cases. And so we work with DCF each and every day in court. So this is something that happens in these types of cases involving children, is you may have a dual track. You may have a track involving the actual child and its welfare, and then a separate track involving potential criminal charges. And that happens all the time.
But your office is not conducting its own investigation now?
The criminal investigation is concluded. The child protection investigation will continue.
Could the result of the child protection investigation affect any future criminal investigation, or is this decision final?
It's final as of now. If there was any new evidence that could be brought to light, that could always we could reassess that. As most criminal cases in Kansas, it's a 5-year statute of limitations.
You
Go
said
ahead.
you're deeply troubled by this situation. How comfortable are you and a child continuing to live in that home?
I can't talk about the child, its placement, or what's going on in that matter. What I can say is the child's safe. And we're troubled because anytime you have a child, one of our primary duties as prosecutors is to protect those who can't protect themselves. And I say this all the time. It's the children and dependent and senior citizens. And so we have even a heightened responsibility to protect those individuals. So it bothers us when we see something that's happened to a child like this, and we can't do anything about it.
Just painting kind of in broad strokes, not necessarily specific to this case, but any case that you've handled where you believe in your heart that a crime has been committed, but you can't file charges, what does that do to you internally?
Well, I mean, it's part of our criminal justice system. And so it happens each and every day across this country where prosecutors believe they know who's associated with committing a particular crime, but can't prove it. And our criminal justice system is based on the fact that we would rather let guilty people go free than convict innocent people. And that is the premise that we work on, is we have to be absolutely sure in the decisions we make, because it greatly impacts people's civil liberties and their freedoms. And so these are not unique decisions that we make as prosecutors. This is something that happens each and every day across this country.
So you do believe a crime was committed, but you just can't say who did it?
Correct.
And we
We're
say
both
Have you been in touch with the Kansas City Chiefs, or did this have any bearing, your decision, on the fact that Tyreek Hill is a star of the Kansas City Chiefs?
I know I was going to be asked that question. I have not contacted or talked to the Kansas City Chiefs, nor does that have any bearing on it. My duty is to treat everybody the same way, each and every case, no matter what your stature is in the community. And I have a much higher duty to that child than the Kansas City Chiefs. And that has no bearing in my decision.
Have you spoken with the NFL at all?
I'm sorry?
Have you spoken with the NFL or
No.
the league offices?
No.
Have you had any communication with the Chiefs?
No.
Did you feel like you got the cooperation you needed from the parties involved? Is that you seem a little frustrated by this?
I can't really talk about cooperation and frustrations, but I can tell you that the police department did everything they could to put together the best case they could for me to review.
And so there is still, I'm assuming, of these, they will appear in family court like they have been doing on the child. Is that what's next in this child in need of care aspect of this?
I can't confirm or deny the fact that there's a child in need of care proceeding. All I can say is that there is a child protection investigation that is ongoing to make sure that the child's safe.
And you said the child is safe now. The child was taken from the home at some point. Can you?
I can't even talk about that. One of the things that you have to understand is there is even a higher level of secrecy that is associated with children's cases. And it's because you're dealing with minors. And so I have to be very mindful of not talking too much about what we are or are not doing because of the rights of that minor child.
With the boy, is there a timeline as to when the police were notified of this and when the boy was actually contacted or investigated or interviewed by the police or Child Protective Services?
Again, that would be going into particulars of the case, and I really can't discuss that because there's an ongoing investigation.
Was he comfortable inside his own home, or how is he doing right now? I know you said he's safe, but his mental.
I can't really discuss that aspect of it, but what I can say is that the child is safe.
Is he in the home with the parents now?
I can't even talk about that.
Was the March 14th incident a new incident, or was there additional information brought forward about a previous incident?
Again, this was an ongoing investigation over a period of time. A lot of you have received the face sheets of 2 prior incidents at the Overland Park residence. Other than that, I really can't discuss how this all kind of unfolded. But I can say that the investigation is continuing in regards to the child protection action.
When that child protection action is concluded, would you be able to answer those questions then once that proceeding is?
Again, those are very guarded situations because you're dealing with minor children. It's not like a typical criminal case, and the courts are very, very cautious about divulging that type of information for obvious reasons.
Is there also a way to determine who committed the crime, what sort of charges would have been filed?
Again, that would require me to talk about the particular facts of this case, and I respect the fact that you're asking the question, but I can't talk about it.
So you can't clarify that it would have been child abuse?
I really don't want to get into the particulars of the case. I think you have enough information that you can run with that, but I'm not going to confirm that information.
So just to clarify, why can't you specify, like if you're declining to move forward with any charges, why wouldn't you be able to talk about what led you to that decision and like, what the crime was?
Because there is a child protection investigation ongoing, and when those cases go forward, we are very limited on what we can divulge.
And just to clarify, how can you determine that a crime was committed while not being able to determine who committed it? What separates the difference?
Well, like a lot of crimes, it's a whodunit. And in many times with child cases, the children can't necessarily speak for themselves. So that becomes a very difficult situation. I'll give you an analogy. If you had like a shaken baby case that we all see charged on numerous occasions, well, many instances in those cases, it's about who had contact with the child, and you may have multiple people that have contact, but the ultimate question is who actually committed the acts. And so those are always the most difficult cases for us to prosecute and to charge. And so those are the types of situations that we deal with all the time. So this isn't unique when you're dealing with child cases because of the fact that, again, they're vulnerable, they can't speak for themselves, and so many times it makes it more difficult in these investigations.
So it's fair to say someone hurt this child, but you just don't know who did it?
That is a correct statement.
Steve,
and that's why you can't charge either person?
That is correct.
Speaking of children involved, and I don't know if this is outside your purview, but Crystal Espinal, who's one of the subjects of your investigation, is now pregnant. What happens with the children that she has inside of her now?
That would, again, require me to go into information related to child case investigations, and so I'm going to decline to make any comments on that.
Can you just at least tell us if there's a plan for those children to keep those children safe?
Again, I know DCF is involved in this, and I'm going to let DCF handle this the way they handle it, which is not in the public, but handling it appropriately with the actual parents and making sure.
Do you know if this little 3-year-old is okay physically? Can you talk to that?
What we can ensure the public is he's safe. Beyond that, I'm not going to talk about it.
In coordination with DCF, do you get any sense of an idea of how long this investigation will go on from their perspective? It's
very fact-driven. It depends on every particular case, and it can be driven by a number of factors, so it's really hard to speculate on that.
Steve, how common or rare is it for you or anybody in your position to say, I believe a crime was committed, but we can't press charges?
Oh, that happens to prosecutors quite a bit.
Quite a bit. Okay.
It's just you don't typically have a press conference to announce that.
Quite a bit in a sense that you would say that publicly?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it happens. And, again, it's much better to let a guilty person go free than convict an innocent person. That's the big premise behind the criminal justice system. And so if we're unsure about what is happening, and again, it has to be based on evidence. And evidence, like we call it, call your first witness. How are you going to present that in open court in order to prove the facts of the case? And so it's one of those struggles that we deal with in the criminal justice system. But we still have the best system in the world as far as equating out justice and making sure it's fair. And you want to be fair to all parties and make sure that your decisions are based on evidence in the law.
So would you say the parents were the two individuals that may have harmed the child?
I'm not saying that either.
Given the information that you have and the amount of detail you can give, is it safe to assume that when this event occurred, when this crime was committed, that there were only 3 people in the house?
I'm not going to talk about whether there's other people in the house at any of those times.
Well, it's frustrating to say that this is a failure to the 3-year-old who, like you said, can't speak for himself and, like you said, has been a victim of a crime, but you can't prove who did it. Is this a failure to that 3-year-old?
In a sense, yes, because we want to hold people accountable that hurt children. But like I said, there's other mechanisms for us to protect that child other than filing criminal charges against an individual. And that's why the child protection investigation will continue to ensure that child is safe. Whereas our main focus on this criminal investigation is, can we determine who actually hurt this child, and actually can we prove that in open court?
And the child protection investigation, the child services investigation, that was going on before you got involved, before your office.
It was a dual action.
And so then what prompted your office to step in and also investigate?
Anytime you have an incident involving a child, many times you will have a dual operation. You will have one that ensures the safety of the child while there's a criminal investigation ongoing. And so I don't think a lot of people understand that DCF and law enforcement work a lot together on those cases. And they work hand in hand, but with ultimate different goals in mind. We're real lucky. We have a good working relationship with DCF and law enforcement, and there's a good collaboration in these types of cases.
Sounds like you're saying neither the NFL nor the Chiefs have reached out to your office requesting any documents at this time?
I know the NFL has tried to contact us, but I have not responded back to them.
And will you provide them with any, or would you be able to provide them with any documents?
They're under the same standard as the rest of the media, and that is whether or not these are open records or not. I will tell you, because there is a current investigation, I'm sure a lot of you will be asking for the records. It'll probably be sealed because it's a child protection investigation. And I know you'll be frustrated by that, but it's probably going to be what's happening. Also, Christy has a copy of the what I just read to you in regards to this investigation, so you have your own copy. I'm sorry that I can't divulge more information, but again, I hope you're mindful of the fact that we're talking about a minor child, and we have to be very cognizant of the fact that minor children have even greater protections when dealing with the criminal justice system in the courts.
When did your office decide to not press charges? When did your office reach that conclusion that you weren't going to go forward with pursuing criminal charges?
Sorry.
Oh, just a couple days ago. I mean, that's why we've set this press conference. I don't know about a definitive date and time, but it was just recently that we received all the information from law enforcement, and we were able to move forward with making a decision.
When did police conclude their investigation and present that evidence to your office?
It's been an ongoing deal for some months.
You frustrated that you can't file charges?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the child's been hurt. And so, yes, as a prosecutor, as a father of 4 kids, yes. It frustrates me when someone hurts a child that you can't do anything about it.
So it sounds like the reason why you can't bring criminal charges is because one of the parties involved didn't say who exactly did it. It sounds like you have the evidence that the child was hurt, whether it's broken bones, bruising, whatever the case may be, but nobody said this is the person who did that. Is that correct?
I think my facts in my sheet pretty much set out the reasons why. But one of the elements of the crime is you have to prove who the person is who committed those acts. And you're right. That's one. Identity of the individual is one of those elements.
Tyreek Hill is a high-profile person in this community. Obviously, plays for the Chiefs. Had a troubled legal past. His probation was over from those incidents before. Did any of that have any bearing on this, or once that probation's over, you're just looking at whatever happens in the case?
I mean, you try to consider as many facts as you and weigh it, but we tried to center on the facts and evidence in this case in making our decision.
Would there ever come a point where you guys would share some of the information or records of this case with the NFL or his employer?
I would say it'd be highly unlikely.
What if there was another incident in the future? I know that's speculative. I get it, but
I mean, we'll do our due diligence on any future instances, or if we get additional information, we'll do our due diligence at that time. But I mean, that would be speculating as to what we may or may not do. Well, I appreciate you understanding that we're very limited on what we can provide you, but I know a lot of you were interested in it, and I felt like it was in the public's interest to go ahead and release this information, put some closure on what's going to happen in this case, or at least some closure, so we could all move forward.
And just to clarify, what would it take for you to change your decision and reconsider charges?
I don't think it would be fair for me to try to say what would or would not.
But it's possible?
Anything's possible. So, But thank you for the time, folks. Appreciate you coming out today.
You're watching here a news conference happening right now with Johnson County District Attorney Steve Howe, basically talking about Chiefs wide receiver Tyreek Hill, who has been the subject of 2 investigations by Johnson County authorities and the Kansas Department of Children and Families. He is saying here the county has declined now to file any charges, though he says he is still deeply troubled and concerned about Tyreek's child and thinks that a crime nonetheless has occurred. So there is an ongoing child protection investigation happening